Today's parable is all about investing in what God has given you, and it's called the parable of the 10 talents. And it starts with these three.
Bo, I have 10 talents.
No, not talents, Ben. It's more like money.
Is this your card?
No.
Okay. Is this your card?
No.
Okay. Throat singing.
What do you call a cow with no legs?
What?
Ground beef.
Close your eyes. Is this your card?
No.
Flip my hair. Is this your card?
No. Nope.
What do you call a cow with 3 legs?
I don't know.
Lean beef.
Speed reading with no comprehension.
What did it say?
I don't know. Rabbit out of a hat. Where'd it go? Are these your cards?
They are not my cards.
What do you call a cow with 2 legs?
What?
Your mom.
Is it this one?
No.
Reverse handstand.
Ben, Jesus was referring to talents as not what you do, but like your money.
That was only 9. Narcoleptic tendencies.
Okay.
I love that. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jordan. If we haven't yet had the chance to meet, and I am the digital discipleship pastor here at Faith Chapel. And I want to say a unique welcome to everybody who's joining online. We've got people from all over Montana, Colorado, Washington, and Texas. It is so good to have you joining with us today. And no matter where you are, whether you're in person or you're joining online, I just want to say a unique welcome to those of you who might be what we call spiritually unresolved, which would mean maybe you're not quite sure what you believe about Jesus and this message, and you're just exploring it, kind of trying to test the waters. And if that's you, I just want to say welcome. Thanks for taking a risk and coming to church and exploring this message. We're honored to have you with us. And one of the things we'll be discussing today is this concept of the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. And I'm going to use this phrase quite a bit. And so I want to define it for you because I'm going to say it over and over again just to make sure we're on the same page. And so I'm defining the kingdom of heaven this way. The kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God is essentially the place or status where God's goodness and characteristics are experienced. His rule and his reign is unchallenged, and where life and wholeness are restored. That's what we're talking about when we say the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. It's more than just a future reality, something that's down the road, heaven to end up at. It's something that we also can experience today. So that's where we're going. Have you ever been somebody who's been on the outside, where you just knew that you weren't one of the insiders? Maybe you didn't feel comfortable somewhere. I know I haven't. It's the worst, right? It's the worst when you just feel like you're not the one who's in and you're missing something. And over the last several years, I've taken up fly fishing, and I learned several years ago I got to go with some guides, and so I had guys who were in a boat and they're tying on all my flies for me. They're telling me where to place my line. They're rowing for me, getting me to the right place on the river, and it was fantastic. I didn't really have to do any of the hard work. I just had to try and look good doing it, right? And eventually I got to a point where I was like, hey, I want to do this on my own. I want to figure out how I can show up to a river or a lake and fish by myself without having someone show me what to do. Well, as I'm going through it and I'm trying to acquire the gear, I realize there's a whole language tied up in fly fishing. And it's really easy to feel like you have no idea what you're talking about. I know I did. I felt like an absolute idiot trying to learn some of the phrases. I mean, there's so many bugs to try and figure out. So one summer, I'm acquiring the gear. I want to go out and get on the river. And so I ask somebody who's much farther along than me. I'm like, hey, I really want to catch something on this river. What would you recommend I use? And so he goes, yeah, you should just use like a elk or caddis. And I looked at him and my eyes were probably just wide and like deer in the headlights. And I had no idea what he said. I had no clue. And I was like, oh, yeah. Sure. So what again? He goes, yeah, in elk or caddis. Maybe it was like 12, 14. And I was like, yeah, okay. You got it. super familiar. I've got so many of those. I had no idea. I felt like an idiot. I felt like an outsider. I didn't understand the language. And if you are an angler, you know what I'm saying is elk, hare, caddis, and a caddis is a type of fly. But in the moment, I had no clue what on earth he was talking about. And it feels silly to be the outsider, right? It's a bummer to be the person who's completely missing it. And so we're going to read about a parable. It's called The Wise and the Foolish Builder. And Jesus is using this as a picture of somebody who's completely missing it. And that would be the foolish one. We would call that person the foolish builder. They just missed it. They were missing everything about the way they should have built their life. And so he's going to use this as a picture of what it looks like to be wise, to be the wise one, to build your life on something solid. And the context of the wise and foolish builder, this parable, is actually at the end of a long message that Jesus gave called the Sermon on the Mountain. So this is the way that he wraps up his message to his hearers. And so the way he finishes this whole message is by using this parable found in Matthew chapter 7. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine being the sermon he just gave, these words of mine, and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So Jesus gives us, in the summary of his sermon, this is how you have wisdom. This is how you build your life. Be the wise one. Don't be the one who missed it. Don't be the foolish one. And so we would probably ask, okay, well then how? What were you talking about to be the wise person? We should probably figure that out, right? And so Jesus is going to spend some time, he did spend some time teaching on things that we need to do. In fact, a phrase that we use around here is he's going to invite us into a new way to be human, which means that he's redefining some of the things that would have been understood at that time and even today. And he's going to say, no, this is what I'm inviting you into to flourish as a human being. And throughout the sermon, he's going to use these parallel phrases. He's going to say, you have heard that it was said, but now I say to you. And all of his hearers at that time, most of them would have probably been Jewish, and so they'd have grown up in an environment where there would have been rabbis or teachers who would have been expounding on the law that Moses would have given, the Torah, and they would have said, this is how you live your life. And so throughout the message, Jesus is going to say, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you, which means he's redefining some things. He's becoming the new source of truth. My son Harvey, he's 8 years old. He just finished first grade. And frequently, he loves to talk. I mean, the kid could talk about anything. In fact, one of the things he'll say to me sometimes is like, hey, Dad, do you want to just go talk? It's so cute. Like, he just wants to sit and chat, and I love it. But one of the things that he'll do when we're just talking is he'll say, hey, Dad, did you know? And he'll fire off this, like, string of facts. Hey, Dad, did you know that when a butterfly, and he's got all these things just tucked away, all these little bits of knowledge. And sometimes he'll say something that's absolutely absurd. I mean, it is crazy. There's no way it's true. And what I've learned, I tend to be kind of an argumentative person, and I want to correct wrong thinking. That's just kind of who I am. And so when he says something wrong, my gut response is, oh, I need to fix that. I need to tell you what's actually true. But what I've learned to do is when Harvey tells me something is I'll first ask him one question. I'll say, hey, where did you hear that? Who told you that? Because here's what I've learned is that sometimes what Harvey's telling me is coming from a neighbor kid. And that neighbor kid is not really an excellent source of truth. Or maybe it's a schoolmate who heard something and twisted it and said it their own way, and that's also not a great source of truth. But if he says, oh, I read it in this book, or I heard it from one of our family members, grandma, grandpa, my aunt, my uncle, then I might go, oh, That's actually a great source of truth. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong. And so what Jesus is doing when he's saying, you have heard that it was said, but now I say to you, is he's redefining who their source of truth was on how to live life. They'd been hearing from these rabbis and these teachers, but he's saying, you've heard this, and that's great, but now I am telling you, I'm the source. I am the source of authority. I'm the source of truth. Now I'm saying to you, this is how you live your life. So if he's the source, and if he's saying, build your life this way, we probably need to figure out, what is he telling us to do? If he's our source of authority, if he's our source of truth, we should probably ask the question, what are you asking of us, Jesus? And so we're going to look at the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to look at this message. And I would invite you to follow along. I would invite you to go back and read it at some point, because here's the reality today. I don't have enough time to talk about everything that Jesus covered. There's a ton of stuff inside the Sermon on the Mount that is worth taking the time to read, to study, and to understand. And I've grown up in the church, and I've heard many messages on different snippets of the Sermon on the Mount. But what we're going to do today is we're going to explore the Sermon on the Mount as a whole. We're going to look at it as a big picture. I'm going to do my best to try and encapsulate some of these big ideas, because if Jesus is going to take the time to sum up with a parable that says anybody who wants to be wise is going to build their life this way, to sum up this message, I want to look at, okay, what is that message as a whole? And so we're going to explore that. So the first part of the Sermon on the Mount is going to be an invitation to the kingdom. An invitation to the kingdom. Essentially what Jesus is going to do is he's going to say, God's kingdom is for you. God's kingdom is for you. So he opens up his sermon with something that we would call the Beatitudes. And you might be familiar with the Beatitudes. And I'll give you a couple examples. The first two, I believe, are, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Or, blessed are you who mourn, for you will be comforted. Nate talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but in this culture, if you had something go wrong, if you had tragedy, if you had death, if you had sickness, there was a common understanding that most likely this horrible thing happened to you because you had something going wrong in your life. There was some sort of issue that he wasn't happy with you, and so he was punishing you. You were being disciplined or being given some sort of unfavor from God, and so that's why this bad thing happened to you. But what Jesus is saying is that even though culturally that would have been your understanding and your mourning, he's saying those who mourn, those who have had this tragedy, those who have gone through something that would cause them to be in this state, you've heard that it was said, God's kingdom isn't for you, that you're outside the lines. But I'm saying to you, blessed are you because the kingdom of heaven is for you. He's redefining the lines. He's expanding the boundary lines of what their understanding of the kingdom of God would be. And as people, I think we're really good at disqualifying ourselves. I know I am. It can be so easy to come up with reasons why I don't belong in God's kingdom. But what Jesus was saying to them, and I think he would say to us today, is God's kingdom is for you. It's for you. But that might be hard to hear, because I would ask the question today, what have you been told? What have you been told about God's kingdom and who it's for? Our tendency for me is to place myself on two extremes. On one end, I tend to think, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be a part of this kingdom. If you only knew what I've done, what I've thought, how much I pretend and build myself up when I actually have no idea, you'd get it. I'm not worthy. Or on the other end of the spectrum, I can tend to get, man, I'm very worthy. I might be one of the few who is. If you knew what I've done, if you knew how I thought, and if you knew how great of a dad and a husband I am, of course I fit in God's kingdom. And what can happen is I can get really comfortable. And for those of you who've been following Jesus for a long time, you might even be able to relate with this idea of when I get comfortable in the kingdom of heaven, I start to think that I'm one of the few who's worthy. And Jesus is going to warn throughout the Sermon on the Mount. He's going to be talking against what happened with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, where they begin to get exclusive and say, we're comfortable in God's kingdom, and here's all these boundary lines that say why these other people are out. Because as humans, we tend to to feel exclusive and want to feel that way. And so we say, hey, we don't want it to be for them. Because if they could get in, then anyone could get in. And what does that say about me? But what Jesus is doing in this moment is he's expanding and he's saying, no. The kingdom of heaven is for you. And it's here and it's now. Number 2 is life in the kingdom. And what Jesus is going to do is he's going to take several different analogies to say this is who we are. If God's kingdom is for you, if God's kingdom is for me, this is what it looks like to live in the kingdom. Here's what it looks like to be in the kingdom of God. I don't know how many of you follow soccer, or as it's known internationally, football, but very recently there was a big shift in the world of international soccer. And there's a guy named Lionel Messi who was just acquired by the football club Inter Miami. And Messi is considered one of the greatest footballers or soccer players of all time. The guy helped lead Argentina to the World Cup this last time around, scored some game-winning plays, and even as he just joined Inter Miami, he scored a game-winning goal. He's just a legend and just moved to the United States. But for Messi to join Inter Miami and to wear this bright pink jersey that he now wears, there's some expectations. There's some things that he has to do in order to wear the jersey to be on the team. First, he's got to pass. I mean, if you know anything about soccer, you understand that it's a team sport and it requires a lot of passing. The second thing would be he needs to make some huge plays. He needs to score. I mean, he's known for it. And so there's an expectation for him to wear that jersey. He better score. And then third, the coach or the manager probably has some team values that he's going to define. Hey, if you're going to play for Inter Miami, if you're going to represent us, this is who we are. This is how we act on the field. This is what we do. This is how we conduct ourselves. And so the coach is probably going to define that. If Messi decides, I don't want to pass anymore, this is about me, I'm going to take the ball all the time. If Messi decides, I'm not going to make those plays, I just don't want to do it, I'm not feeling like it today. And if Messi decides, I just really don't care for your values, I'm going to violate them, I don't care, there's a really good chance that Messi will no longer wear that jersey. And so what Jesus is saying is he's saying, if you want to live in the kingdom, if the kingdom of God is for you, this is what it looks like to wear my jersey. This is what it looks like to represent me. And see, a lot of what he's doing all throughout the Sermon on the Mount is he's also providing warnings for the people of Israel, the Jewish people, because they had forgotten throughout history what it looked like to represent God. Their whole role, the whole covenant between God and Israel was, you need to represent me to the rest of the world, the rest of the nations, to say, this is what God looks like, how he acts, how he functions. You're supposed to carry my blessing to the rest of the world. And so Jesus is saying a reminder to Israel, but also an invitation for those who are in the kingdom. This is what it looks like to represent me. And this isn't legalism. Because on some level, this could just be right behavior modification where we're just trying to tweak and make ourselves look just so, but that's not what this is. This isn't legalism, and this isn't trying to earn our way into the kingdom, right? That's why we started with the first point. It's already for you. The invitation already stands. So this is what it looks like to step into the kingdom and then respond with our lives and how we function representing Jesus. And I also love that Jesus went first, because all of what he communicates is a blueprint for his own life. He does these things. He lives them out throughout the story and the account of his life. And we are now to follow. So he doesn't just set a high standard and say, good luck, figure it out. He lives it out first and invites us to follow. And at the beginning, the phrase practice implies we're not going to get it right all the time. In fact, we're going to fail. We're going to miss the mark sometimes. And so he's even implying in the way that he phrases, if you practice, puts these words into practice, those are the people who are wise. Those are the people who are representing me. So here are the highlights of life in the kingdom. The first one is be salty. Be salty. Jesus is going to use two different analogies, and the first one is about being salt in the world. And so his invitation here and his definition would be this: your job as representing me is to be carrying and enhancing the goodness of life. It is your job to preserve and enhance the goodness of life. That's the role of salt, right? It's to preserve and enhance the good things. And then his analogy of light is saying, hey, there's going to be dark places in the world. It's your job to carry light into dark places. You are to be people who carry hope into hopeless situations. So be salty people. Second would be don't tiptoe. Don't tiptoe. Jesus is going to take a few different things that we're going to run into and have to wrestle to the ground as humans. I imagine all of us have interacted with these things at some point in our lives. And what he's going to do is he's going to talk about anger, lust, and lies. And here's what he's going to do. He's going to say, you've heard that it was said, right? You've heard that it was said, do not kill. And so he's going to say, that's what you've heard. And so let's pretend there's a line right here. And what we can do as humans is we can walk and we can tiptoe right up to that line, get as close as we can so we're not crossing it. And we go, at least I didn't kill him. I didn't do it. I didn't kill him. But you should see him. He shouldn't be, you should see the other guy. At least I didn't kill him, though. I didn't cross the line. And what Jesus is going to invite us into is actually say, no, don't just tiptoe up the line. What I want you to do is I want you to step back. I don't want you to even hope for their downfall. The way you think of that person in your anger, I want you to make friends, make reconciliation instead of hoping for their downfall, for their ruin. And then he says, you know what? I'm actually going to raise the bar one more. Take one more step back. I don't even want you to speak ill of that person. Don't even say bad things about them. Instead, make friends. And then he's going to do the same thing with lust. And he's going to say, don't tiptoe right up to the line and say, at least we didn't go all the way. It wasn't full-on adultery. He's going to say, no. Take a step back. Don't get entangled in that. Don't let it be a distraction to the way that you think or view other people. And then one more. Cut out the things. Pay the price now so that you don't have to pay a bigger price later. Cut out the things that distract and entangle you. And then he's going to talk about lies. And he's going to say, hey, don't be the type of person that has to say, no, I promise I'll be there this time. I know last time I wasn't, but this time I promise I'll be there. You can count on me. I promise this time will be different. Jesus gives us this analogy of if we have to use so many words to prove our trustworthiness, the chances are we're not trustworthy. So be somebody who just says yes, who just says no, and lives a trustworthy life. And then he uses this analogy of the fires of Gehenna, being in danger of the fires of Gehenna. Gehenna was a literal dumpster fire on the outside the walls of Jerusalem. And what Jesus is saying is when we let our anger burn and boil inside of us, what we're doing is we're in danger of this death-bringing fire burning inside of us and just causing destruction in our own lives. And so his analogy of all these things is saying this: when we don't deal with our anger, our lust, and our lies, we're just bringing destruction upon ourselves. And sandwiched in the middle of these is Jesus' teaching on divorce. And we're not going to go into that right now. You can have a deep sigh of relief. I won't have time to cover that. But what I think Jesus is trying to say by sandwiching that in there is when we don't deal with our anger, our lust, and our lies, we will experience separation in our relationships. So instead of tiptoeing up and bringing the bare minimum and saying, you know what, at least I didn't cross the line, he's saying don't tiptoe up there. Bring your best. Bring your best to relationships. Make friends. Make reconciliation. Cut out the things that distract and entangle and be trustworthy. The next one is go one more. I have a friend of mine, and he's a long-distance runner, and he got a tattoo on one of his thighs, and it says, go one more. And if you've ever done any long-distance running, you would have experienced that when you get up into the higher mileage, you start to have the mental game of, can I go any farther? And so he got this tattoo on his leg to remind himself he always has one more mile in the tank. He can always go one more. And so I'm going to kind of steal that because Jesus is going to then talk about and explore injustices committed against us. And he's going to invite us to go one more. And there's three different injustices he uses. The first one would be if somebody backhands you, is what's implied. If somebody strikes you on the cheek with a backhand, okay, a disrespectful blow. The second one would be if somebody takes you to court and sues you for all you're worth, everything you've got, including the clothes on your back. And then the final one that Jesus uses is if a Roman soldier asks you to carry their equipment or gear, because in that day, the oppressive government, Rome, could ask the oppressed people, the Jews, they could say, you have to carry my stuff, all of my gear, all of my equipment for up to 1 mile. You can't say anything about it. It's legal. Just do it. And so what Jesus is going to say, for these injustices, this oppression done to us, for the disrespectful thing, here's what I'm inviting you to do. When someone backhands you disrespectfully, instead turn the other cheek. And what is that doing? It's going one more by saying, I invite you to hit me again, but at this time, I want you to hit me as an equal. Because a backhand is disrespectful, but if I have to face you like this, I'm viewing you as an equal person. So Jesus is saying, go one more, absorb the evil, and invite that person to strike you as an equal. The second one, if somebody comes in, takes you to court for literally everything you have, and they take your cloak, I invite you to go one more, and I say, give them your shirt. Give them the actual shirt off your back so that they have to walk away from the courtroom knowing they left you standing naked in the courtroom. And you're revealing the injustice of the lawsuit for what it is, evil. You're shining a light on it. Go one more. And then the final one, he says, when that Roman soldier invites you to carry this burden of 1 mile, I invite you to literally go 1 more mile. Because what you're doing is you're saying, I see your oppression. I see that you're trying to force me to do something, but I'm going to serve you even still. And I'm going to go 1 more mile, and I'm going to show you that I can serve you even when you're not forcing me to. Absorb the evil and reveal it. Because this is what happens. When we don't fight back, when we don't plot revenge, when we go one more, it shines a light on injustice. It reveals the evil for how truly evil and unjust it is. And it's a challenge. This is not an easy invitation. But what I love is that Jesus did this. At the end of his life, he was struck and he was silent and he turned the other cheek. At the end of his life, he was stripped of all his clothes and was naked. And at the end of his life, he had a Roman soldier look at him and told him to carry his own crossbeam on his back and carry his own weapon of murder before he was killed on a hill. And so Jesus modeled what it looks like to go one more. The final one is inside out. Inside out. Jesus is going to take a few different examples and he's going to talk about mismatches in our heart, in our lives. And he's going to really deal with what's going on with our motives and our priorities. And he's going to challenge us. He's going to say, don't do things just to look good. Don't pray just to put on a religious show. Don't give just to show everybody else how generous you are. And don't fast just as a sign of spirituality. Because what he's saying is, it's about what's going on inside more than the attention that you'll receive for this spiritual discipline. And if what you're after anyways, by doing one of these spiritual things, is attention, you'll receive it. You'll get it. The language Jesus uses, you'll receive your reward in full. If you're looking for attention, if you want people to see just how spiritual and pious and holy you are, that's what you'll get. People will think that you can put on the show. But what he's going to invite into instead is he's going to say, I want your inner being to be healthy and whole and connected to me. So instead, do these things in silence, in quiet, and in secret. Do these spiritual disciplines for the right reasons because it's all about connection with God. It's all about connection with Jesus. Don't just do these things to look spiritual. So he's going to challenge the mismatches in our lives. And then finally, we have road signs of the kingdom. Road signs of the kingdom, which are essentially trying to get us to pay attention. And so he's going to give a couple analogies and a couple warnings at the end of the sermon. And he's going to use the narrow and the wide gate, which is something you might be familiar with. And then he's going to talk about false prophets. And why would we even need road signs in the kingdom of God? Well, the reason we would need them is because we're not living in the fully realized kingdom of God. There are other kingdoms that exist right now. There are other kingdoms that exist alongside the kingdom of God currently. And so what Jesus is going to do by using these warnings, these road signs of the narrow and wide gate and the false prophets, is he's saying, pay attention. Watch out that you don't start drifting. Watch out that you don't get distracted, because here's the thing, you're not just going to stumble your way into the kingdom of heaven. You have to live intentionally toward my kingdom. But there will be distractions, and there will be detractors, people who are trying to get you to believe that there's another way, there's a different way to live. So, my summary of all of this Sermon on the Mount to answer the question, how should we build our life, would be this: eyes fixed, heart surrendered, hands active. That's how you build the house on the rock. Eyes fixed on God, we step into his invitation into the kingdom. Heart surrendered, we align our minds with his kingdom principles. And hands active, we practice living in a way that reflects these things. Because the challenge is this: Jesus is saying, I don't want you to just hear, wow, Jesus, what a great teaching on anger. Wow, that was good. And then we don't change anything. Or, hey, Jesus, I love that idea of salt. What a cool little analogy. And then we don't become salty people who preserve the good, because that's just a fan. That's just a super fan. Jesus doesn't want people to just be super fans. It'd be like just buying the jersey and not playing on the team, to go back to the soccer analogy, right? But what Jesus is doing is he's saying, no, I'm inviting you to be on the team. I'm inviting you to represent me to the world. So to wrap up, to conclude, I've got several things that I want us to think about. But if Jesus is not your source of authority today, if he's not your source of truth, then here's the beauty of this: is this is a free pass for you. You can just walk out of here and go, wow, they are just as crazy as I thought they were, but it doesn't apply to me, so good luck. But there's an invitation for you as well, that if you haven't made Jesus your source of authority, that could be something you step into today. That maybe today is the day you say, you know what, I do want to live in a kingdom like that. I do want to follow Jesus in that way. But if Jesus is your source of authority, there are huge implications for how we live our lives and how we step into reflecting him. So here's some questions to help us process. First would be, whose jersey are you wearing? And does your life reflect God's kingdom? What are you building your life on? Status, image, safety, religion. And when I say religion, I'm talking about the act of being religious, not the connectedness to God, or the words of Jesus. Have you drifted? And how can you live intentionally this week?